cats get production credits. We feel it's important that everyone who contributes gets a nod, and my cats remind me of a few things. Take lots of naps, but take no shit. Basically, no gods, no meowsters. And special shout out to Ghost, who's being a very good boy as I go on a field trip to my friend Taylor's house to record this episode about mutual aid. So, welcome to Red Leg Revolution. Our only hope is each other. A few things. One, if you find us on iHeartRadio, be sure to click Red Leg Revolution. I mentioned this because I found out the other day that 6 weeks after I started this show, some dude started a show called Red Pill Revolution. When I looked, he had one episode up, but by the description, it's probably like the antithesis to this show. I wanted to make sure you all know that I don't have a hand in a Red Blank Revolution podcast network. I don't know this dude, and I'm not going to give him any play, but I reckon we wouldn't be friends anyway. And secondly, we finally got enough plays to get an Anchor FM sponsorship, so if there's a commercial in a weird place, that's why. Any money made from this show is going to better equipment so I can produce some shows that y'all want to start. By the way, if you want to start a show, I'm the guy to talk to. All right, finally. All right, now we're at the introduction. Welcome to Red Leg Revolution, the podcast about community. That's our whole shtick, helping connect people to build a better world from the literal ashes of the old. Last week, we had a discussion about fascism, and that took a lot out of me, so Amy and Amanda will be joining us again in a few weeks to continue that particular discussion. Today, though, we're going to bring some positivity to counterbalance the doomsaying in the first few episodes. Plus, between fascists and Ronald Reagan, I need some sunshine. So today we have Taylor with Kansas City Mutual Aid with us to discuss solidarity. Yeah, we're talking about solidarity, not in a theoretical sense, but in a practical manner. Like, what is solidarity? How do we build solidarity? And how can you achieve solidarity in your community? Spoiler alert, mutual aid helps. So, how are you feeling, Taylor? How's life? What are your thoughts on the world?
I'm feeling pretty all right. It happens to be the time of year where you see a lot of people engage in more charity and solidarity work, just given the nature of the holiday season in the U.S. So I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of projects people have going on. But other than that, I'm pretty good.
Good, awesome. So I feel like I'm just bringing it up because I spent 4 hours doing an episode yesterday, from writing it to producing it. Christ, I hope they convict Kyle Rittenhouse because, yeah, that's going to get scary real quick. So, Taylor, how would you describe a community? What does a community mean? What does that mean to you?
What is a community? To me, a community is a group of people that look out for one another, support one another, and are just there for one another in a way that's a little bit different than I think we have right now. I feel like community building is something that takes effort and time and dedication. You can't just walk into a group and be like, oh, this is my community. It takes a degree of trust and education and cultural competency.
Yeah.
That I feel like people often take for granted.
That's, I think, really evident too, because I mean, I've lived in all different types of economic strata when it came to my community, and there are definitely, you can't just show up anywhere, whether it's the suburbs or the inner city, and be like, I'm part of this. You have to ingratiate yourself into what's existing, and personally, I much preferred ingratiating myself into more urban communities, because the suburban ones, their notion of community was so skewed. It was community in a very superficial way versus actual direct mutual aid from, assistance from your community,
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Thinking about like the suburbs, it's a lot of performative community.
Yes.
And that's not something that appeals to me at all. I like knowing my neighbors, but also helping my neighbors and for them to help me, being able to alert my neighbors if something's going on. We look out for one another. It's not just who is part of this HOA.
Yeah, right.
Or, whose kids also go to school with my, like my future kids. It's more than that. And it's having confidence in my neighbors to be there for me and vice versa.
Right on. You actually hit the nail on the head. Taylor has not seen this script, so it's awesome that they brought up that. So community is our only hope at surviving these difficult times that we're facing with climate change, fascism, random 17-year-olds murdering people in the street, Community is how we're going to get through it. So that being said, and this is not directed at you, Taylor, because I already know the answers. So listener, do you know the names of your neighbors? Are they your friends? Do you have any idea of the type of work the guy 3 doors down does? Besides write kryptonite, that is. Does your neighbor know what skills you have? In short, how tight-knit is your community? I thought I blacked all this stuff out and we kind of just covered it. Oh wait, I guess no, I didn't. Later. I love having a script to just kind of bounce off of. So we kind of just actually touched on this, so I'll go ahead and bring it up again, but in my experience, I felt the biggest sense of community in the more economically depressed parts of town I've lived in. On the block, everyone knows each other once you've hit that level of trust and built yourself into the community. You know who's still working that construction job, who just quit at Walmart, and who's slinging pot to stay afloat. You spend time in driveways or stoops, backyards or porches trying to beat the heat since no one has a working AC, drinking cheap beer and smoking weed. That was my experience with the community, and I fucking loved it. It was great. By the way, no FCC. I fucking loved it. It was great. I miss the hood. I love where I'm at now because there is a more kind of, it's Lawrence, so there is like an actual sense of real community, but you don't get as wild as you do, living with cool people. So, yeah, but you watch out for each other, and it's even more so, this touches on that superficial thing. There's a big difference between the type of watching out that we see in more economically depressed areas versus suburban areas, because the suburban's so superficial.
Well, and it's like a while ago I had a neighbor who is no longer my neighbor, thankfully. And while he and I had a pretty decent relationship, he was incredibly racist and threatened to call ICE on some of my other neighbors and get them deported. Now, I don't know their immigration status. I'm not assuming one way or another. But in that racist tirade he was throwing, I took it upon myself to sit on my front porch and wait until he was done to make sure the cops didn't show up.
I remember that. Yeah, you posted about it.
To intervene if that happened, and this was all over a parking space, actually. It's free street parking, but whatever gets people off these days. But after that, I wanted to make sure that the neighbors that he was yelling at knew that if something was awry or went awry, that they could lean on me if need be, and we have a very nice relationship now, and they always say hi. And so it's like a different kind of looking out, because I feel like in the suburbs, people just shut their doors, close their windows, look the other way.
Yep.
So anytime we've got stuff going on, whether it is, police in the neighborhood, or, someone needs a job done, that kind of thing, we notify each other so that we keep in contact and have that kind of support network. It's a little bit different based on the circumstances in this neighborhood. Which is,
as it should be, because a good community is going to respond to the needs of all its citizens, which means it's going to fluctuate because an individual's needs fluctuate. So,
absolutely.
So when I lived in the suburbs, I found the exact same thing. Like the layouts, the neighborhoods themselves are detrimental to forging actual community. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, the comparison of Lawrence to, say, Overland Park, I've lived in both places, the fact that not a single place I lived in OP had alleys, which, doesn't seem like that big a deal, but I don't know how many times I got to know the people in my neighborhood because there was an alley and I was always out there doing crap and they'd come out, you know, across the street behind me, whatever. So, you know, it's built that way. And I feel like there's a deliberate effort to that type of building and that type of city planning and layout. It's kind of a more insidious way to be detrimental to us building a sense of community, because a true sense of community is threatening to the powers that be. Now, this may just be me being paranoid talking out my ass, but that's why you tuned into this show. So we should all, you know, strive to know our community and value our sense of community. As we talked a little in the last episode, our best chance to get through the next 50 years is in each other. In order to do that, we have to get to know one another. We have to start forming a community rather than just a bunch of people who just happen to live within proximity of one another. That all needs to start now. Community begins with good deeds, so let's talk about good deeds. Without getting spiritual, esoteric, or eclesiastical, that word means God, a good deed has actual ramifications here and now. The model of pay it forward is a real thing, and it's important in building our communities, because good deeds breed good deeds. And now that's the section I struck, haha. Okay, sorry. I've been through editing this thing like 4 times, but it always changes. Yeah, you know how it goes. Yeah, if y'all want to like ever or pretend like you're doing, you know, do what I do, write a 5,000 word script, cut it down to 3,000 words, get it back up to 4,000 words, cut it down to 2,000 words, and that's not even counting all the, you know, logistical stuff. So have you ever heard the phrase, "Can you do me a solid"?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite phrases. I actually thought that up when I was writing this, and kind of interested me to think where'd that come from, you know? I mean, and actually I was quite surprised. I figured it would have came back from the, you know, 60s Black Power movement, or, you know, maybe the Latino movement in the 40s or whatever. No, actually Seinfeld popularized it. So from superlingo.com by Lauren Gwain, Georgia wrote about the phrase, "do me a solid," back in 2013. As with most slang, it's difficult to trace the origin of the phrase. The best suggestion Georgia had was that it was likely a truncation of a longer phrase like, "do me a favor," "do me a solid favor." Arnold Zwicky, always attentive with Slang Watch, had a post from 2011 on the phrase. He had a quote from the American Dialect Society discussion that suggested it could be a truncation of "do me a solid" service from 1963. So it's possible that there was something. But between our post and AZ's Arnold Zwicky, there's not a whole lot of clarity as to when and where people started using the phrase or when it had its heyday. Some people don't recall hearing it until the 1991 Seinfeld usage, while other people think of it as a 1970s West Coast USA surfer phrase. So, like Seinfeld. Seinfeld is very problematic, and I'm not going to get into right now, but, you know, that's how, that was a meme before the internet, you know. God, so before the internet, I guess shit posters were just all of us wandering around yelling the best lines from all TV shows. I'm just like wandering around at 10 years old going, "Cease the means of production!" So I like to think of that phrase, "do me a solid," another way. I think of it as, can you do me a favor and at the same time help build a solid community? After all, you can't spell solidarity without solid, and you can't spell community without you. Hey, name drop the episode title. Because every time we help a friend, neighbor, comrade, family member, or stranger out, we are building a solid community of mutual aid, of mutual dependence. Don't be scared by that word, dependence. Sure, dependence can be a bad thing, but that depends on the context. A codependent relationship may not be that healthy, but a dependent on my tax returns getting me those sweet monthly Biden bucks for another year. I'll give him that. At least he put that in there. I should have been more than $250, but whatever. I digress. A dependence on alcohol or crack cocaine is probably detrimental to your health. No judgment here. There are a lot of factors that go into drug addiction, but you know, blow up your ass, it's probably not good for something. But a dependence on food and water is what keeps us alive. It really depends on the situation. How many times did I just say depend? This episode brought to you by Depend. They'll hold your shit in. So think about when you were a baby. You were completely dependent on your caregivers. Is that a bad thing? Libertarians would say yes. Give that baby a mining pick and a cigar. Back in our day, we didn't play Minecraft, we lived Minecraft. No, the dependence of a child is not a bad thing because you're a human and you deserve basic care. And most people would inherently care for you if need be. Humans as a whole aren't evil creatures with some notable exceptions like Hitler or Jeff. Seriously, fuck that dude. He knows what he did. There's not a real Jeff. So it's not a moral failing to be dependent on your community. In a lot of ways, we already are. When I drive in my car, I'm depending on everyone else following traffic rules and not driving like they think they're playing GTA and have a 5-star wanted level. When the pandemic hit, I depended on my community to wear masks, social distance, quarantine. Yeah, I know a lot of people didn't, but the people in my community did, and that's the important thing. My community recognized the value of being inconvenienced to save us all. Now that the vaccine is available, I'm depending on my community to assist in eradicating it. Go get your shots if you haven't already, and if you have, time for a booster. I know I'm due for one, and I just found out I can get one. Yay!
I got mine last Tuesday, so.
Sweet. No COVID for any of us. So yeah, we're depending on our community. On a more interpersonal level, I moved recently. When I asked for help, my community responded, and I had a free trailer and extra muscles available. My friends have saved me from self-harm, from suicide attempts. I've been fed more times than I can count when I didn't have money for food. I've been housed when I was homeless. Yeah, I was homeless, by the way. If y'all didn't know that, yeah, 3 times. So don't figure that people's stories. I've been taken care of when I was sick by my community. I'm dependent on my community, and I'm thankful that I have my community to be dependent on. So you got any thoughts on community,
Yeah, so when I got into mutual aid, I didn't have a very clear idea of what that was, and then I realized there was a lot of stuff that I had been doing on my own in different communities that I had been involved with, and then when I met Bailey and Allie and the rest of the folks who are admins and moderators in the mutual aid group, they all brought the different needs and perspectives for their part of town, for their individual smaller communities to the table. And we had a lot of discussions about how do we prioritize need, how do we determine whose needs to fulfill first, and how to go about those needs in a way that was building up, not just throwing a Band-Aid on a situation. We've done a really good job of creating a structure where there are, one-to-one peer donations or support, and really working on learning how to ask for help. One of the things that I think American individualism has taught us is we aren't supposed to be reliant or dependent on other folks. We're supposed to be hyper-individualist, and we are supposed to, fend for ourselves, that bootstrap mentality,
yep.
which doesn't actually make sense and is not constructive. To your point, children are dependent on their caregivers, and eventually it goes full cycle, and our caregivers, we had as kids often end up dependent on their children.
Yep.
At a certain point, and it was a very big wake-up call for me to really look at, okay, who in my community is doing what resources are already available, what programs are running, and who can we connect people with, who are already doing the things. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. And there are a lot of good programs and events that go on in our neighborhoods, and so it was really just learning how to connect people with the resources that they needed in a way that helped build them up, and then they would in turn refer people to those programs and resources. And then also teaching people that it was okay, maybe not teach is probably a bad word, letting people know that it is okay to ask for help and they aren't going to get shamed for it.
Yeah, that's a big one. I see a lot, saw a lot during the pandemic, particularly in the unemployment groups I was in. If you want to know about my journey on unemployment, there's an episode about that. You should check it out. But one thing that I definitely saw was there was a lot of instances where people were getting desperate because unemployment wasn't paying out like they're supposed to, and they'd go to these unemployment groups and be like, what do? I don't have any diapers. And I would jump in and be like, yo, so-and-so mutual aid or this program. But before I had that chance, there were half dozen other unemployed people like, oh, well, shaming them or doing the whole trauma Olympics where it's like, oh, you can't afford diapers, they're about to kick me out of my house, and this is not constructive, this is not conducive. We are going to take a short commercial break, and by short I mean as long as I want to, because I'm pretty despotic. It's my show. I didn't invent capitalism, I just exist in it. Don't hate the player, hate the game. So yeah, we will be right back. Taylor, is there any product, service, group, thing? Do you want to plug something? Right now I'm going to plug Nourish KC, which is an organization off of 8th and Paseo that feeds our working poor and houseless community. If you haven't heard of them before, they do hot lunches Monday through Friday for the community year-round, and they are run almost entirely by volunteers. So check them out and give a shout-out to Miss Linda, who organizes all of that. Very nice. And Taylor is going to send me a list of all these mutual aid groups, and I will post them in the comments. In the meantime, capitalism?
Swamps of Florida.
Honey, is that a new plant?
He dwells, waiting.
Where did those seeds come from, honey?
Silently.
Oh my God! What is that thing?
Sending seeds and stickers across the country. And spreading solidarity.
Have you lost your mind, honey? We can't move to a sustainable commune in upstate New York. What's wrong with you lately?
There's no stopping him. The mighty Skunk Ape is on Facebook, and he's on a mission.
Anarchy! No!
Coming to a post office box near you, the Skunk Ape Liberation Union.
Don't be pinging me right now. Oh, that's you. That's okay. All right. Where the f was I? There we go. Okay. And we're back. You're listening to Red Leg Revolution, the show about community. I'm here talking to Taylor with Kansas City Mutual Aid. We just talked a bit about what community is, what it was, or what we consider it, how we help our community. So let's talk about dual power. Taylor, do you know about dual power? Oh, you know about it, even if you don't know about it.
Yeah, you're gonna have to give me a definition on that one, because
okay.
I'm not recognizing it offhand.
Oh, it's all good. Honestly, it's a concept that I knew about but didn't know about up until about a year ago. So I think it kind of built out of the pandemic. So dual power is building institutions within your community to fill in where the established institution like the state are lacking. So you're already doing that, like distributing the information about these different groups. Obviously, like food insecurity, perfect example. If we, had food stamps for everybody regardless and didn't means test it, the need for community food, it would be less, And so institutions like what you're working on right now, that's dual power.
Okay, cool, yeah. I didn't know that there was a name for it.
I didn't either, and it was really cool when I found out, because I was like, that's a badass name. That's like, I would name my power rock band that, Welcome, it's dual power! So dual power is cool as shit, and dual power starts within the community. Efforts of mutual aid build dual power, like we were just saying. Mutual aid can be a variety of things, and this is where Taylor's like totally going to be on point. It's never charity. This is an important distinction because of how power structures work. Do you want to say something on that before I hop on what I've got?
Yeah, I think that is something that people really get hung up on. It's like, well, I donate to Red Cross, or I donate to Goodwill or the Salvation Army, or those are all acts of charity. When we talk about mutual aid, it is getting people what they actually need to get ahead. It's filling the void that is left with things like WIC or food stamps can't cover a certain thing. Or, for example, we had one of the members had a car that she no longer needed, and she wanted to make sure that...
I'm glad you're talking about this. I actually had it in here, and I forgot to be like, hey, can we talk about this? Yes, tell us about the car.
Yeah, so we had a member who had a car. It was completely paid off. She just wanted to get a new car. And instead of trading in and using that as capital, she had the funds and the resources to just get a new car. And so she wanted to, impact someone's life in a way that would help them get ahead. And so we ended up, the most equitable way we could think about giving the car away as a donation was do it through a raffle. So we had everybody enter the raffle, and it went to a young woman who was in the middle of her fifth or sixth month of a high-risk pregnancy, and she had two previous high-risk pregnancies, and so had two little ones, and had been really struggling to get rides to and from appointments and her kids' appointments.
Let me clarify real quick here. Those of you, if you don't have kids at home, both my kids were considered a high-risk pregnancy. So high-risk pregnancies mean you're not going like to the doctor once a month in the beginning. It's like once every couple weeks, and later on it's basically you're going like 2-3 times more often than standard. So it's not just like, oh, I can't make that twice a month doctor's appointment. You're going to all sorts of doctors, various therapists or specialists or whatever. So that, just if you don't have kids, or if you were lucky and didn't have a high-risk pregnancy, that's a big deal, Yeah.
And so the car luckily went to her, and then we raised the funds for the tag and title, and then first month of insurance. And her getting that car put her ahead. It wasn't just like a handout. It was, I hate using this term, but it was like a hand up. Mm-hmm. It was a way for her to have something that filled a void that she was constantly facing insecurities about. Transportation insecurity is a thing, and while I appreciate and also question sometimes a lot of the things that Mayor Q has done for Kansas City. Yes. The fact that public transit here is free was a huge step for a lot of folks. And so helping alleviate for this member the ability for her to get to and from these doctor's appointments and never having to question how she was going to get there or if her rides fell through. Was a way for one of our members to directly impact another member in a way that the government and other community resources would fall through.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I was watching all this unfold on Facebook, and just like my little commie anarchist ass is just like, oh my god, yay! I was so excited to see that go down.
Well, and it was cool because then we had another member who was facing different struggles and insecurities, but she was so inspired to do that her car, they were replacing her car, and she did the exact same thing. So it's kind of one of those that is inspiring for others to do good works, and having an avenue to do those things. Because a lot of times what we find is that people need help and they don't know who to ask, or they don't know how to ask, and they don't know exactly what it is that they're looking for. And so we've done a lot of the preliminary research for folks. Like Allie and I went through and created multiple Google calendars that have all of the food pantries, diaper pantries, hot meals that are served throughout town for our 8 counties that make up the greater metropolitan area in Lawrence. And then we can say, hey, oh, you need a bed? You can contact Sleepyhead Beds. They're an organization that specializes just in that. Or, oh, you need to know where the diaper pantries are? Happy Bottoms is who to contact. Or, oh, you need, period administration supplies. Nicole, I want to say it's Nicole Springer.
It is Springer. I forgot what the name was. I remember Nicole Springer, but I didn't remember the...
Yeah, we can say, hey, you can reach out to this organization. They can help you. And it's a lot of putting people in contact with organizations they didn't know existed.
Yeah, and that's something I think that I don't know if it's like a problem or if it's just the way things are. I think it's quashed because of that individualistic, American capitalistic bootstraps bullshit. But we have so many programs to benefit everyone, and like I know through my own personal experience, I didn't know these programs existed for the longest amount of time, and I run in pretty radical circles. But when Food Not Bombs is doing 2 events a month and it's not publicized, I don't know to go down there and get dinner. It was really cool when we used to do the really free market at Revolution Records, and I don't know if we're going to get that started again after this all starts. Promise, if you're listening, hit me up. Let's figure it out. But we used to have Food Not Bombs there. We'd have the really free market. IWW had set up a table. DSA was there once, and we'd just engage the community. Downside is it was at Revolution Records, so it's kind of off the beaten path. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But dual power.
Yeah.
Yes, dual power. We're going to probably come back to that car because I'm pretty sure I wrote it somewhere in here too. So, but it's out there. Note the car. The car's awesome. So, for mutual. So, charity. That's where we're at. Charity. Okay. So, charity comes from the top down. There is no equality in charity. Charity is a power thing. Charity comes from those with means to those less fortunate. This is an inherent power disparity in that line of thinking, and that's the problem with charity. Charity is good. Help your friends. But charity and mutual aid are 2 distinctly different animals. And because of that power structure, so, for example, that power disparity is the winner will give charity, the losers take charity, which is that culture thing we were just talking about. A lot of people don't want to reach out, even if they know of these groups, because they've internalized that bootstrap capitalist message where if I have to depend on anyone, I'm a failure. Spoiler, you're not a failure if you have to depend on your community. In fact, I would make the counter argument that you are a failure if you don't have any ties to your community and you're way out on your own limb. That's just my take. So even by doing a charitable deed, one is reinforcing power structures, which in turn allow things like racism or sexism to exist. That's a really esoteric thing. I don't think we're going to get into it here, how power structures reinforce these things and how reinforcing power structures It's all some anarchist theory, but it is the case. Maybe someday. So yeah, for example, charity is giving a man a fish. You can take it away, for example, if he begins to talk about how no one wants to work anymore. The ability to withdraw necessary resources on a whim also demonstrates the power imbalance. The ability to withdraw support often leads to skewed results. I feel like this is endemic to capitalism. I gave you a job and I can take it away. This allows the bosses to give you responsibilities without pay, schedule you with no regard to your work-home life balance, or endanger you for the sake of efficiency. He still has the power to take it away if you don't comply. Thankfully, we're seeing that power dynamic shift today. Yeah, I'm stoked about the, everybody's like, fuck you, we're not going to work unless we, get paid. Yeah, if you're working a shitty job, go try to find, and shitty by society's definition. There are no shitty jobs in my work, except being a cop, because you're not a worker, but everybody else is. Yeah, you should work at McDonald's, tell them you want 25 an hour, you'll walk. Yeah, so comparing that, mutual aid is teaching somebody to fish. You cannot take that knowledge from them. They're no longer dependent on you, and more importantly, they have the ability to teach others as well as feed themselves. They don't have to continue to keep you happy to keep the fish coming. Now, get real, get personal for a second. I've been a receiver of charity. I've also been a receiver of mutual aid. Numerous times when I was a kid, the only reason we had a bountiful Christmas was because of the Catholic Church that my parents were part of. We'd get adopted and get some Christmas presents we couldn't afford, some new clothes, and a Christmas dinner box. As a kid, I loved it because I knew my parents couldn't afford the things on my list, but these well-meaning Catholics could. Then, Christmas break would end, and I'd have to go back to parochial school with the kids of those who gave me the charity. The kids looked down on me because I had to receive that charity. They'd insult me, they'd make fun of me, because they knew they bought the gifts that I would end up getting, because my parents couldn't. Because this is why bootstrap mentality sucks. But mutual aid is different. Mutual aid is exactly what the name says. Mutual aid. The inherent premise behind it is stated right there. I will help you and you will help me. There is no hierarchy. No one has the power in the interaction because they're on equal footing. Of course I'll teach you to fish, Bob. After all, you taught me how to weave better baskets or fix the gear shaft on my car. Something like that. Mutual aid is sharing knowledge and empowering one another, among other things. Got anything you want to add?
Yeah, the way that I've always seen mutual aid in action is it's not a Band-Aid mentality. It's not like I'll feed you this one time. It's like, how do we work together to improve your situation?
Yeah.
How do we work together to improve my circumstances? Whatever it is, it's a mutual kind of growth and healing opportunity.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I had gotten divorced and was living on my own, I was survive on like $34 a paycheck plus whatever I might make in tips delivering pizza. And that $34 was after I paid, my car note and rent, utilities, all of that. And so I never thought in my mind, I can go to a food bank or anything along those lines, because I was hyper independent. I was like, not me, bootstrap, I'll get out of it somehow. And looking back on that now, I really wish I had had the mentality of saying, hey, like I need some help. And it wasn't until a friend of mine said, you live on $34 in 2 weeks for food? And I said, yep, food and whatever, gas and entertainment or whatever I wanted to do. And if, I need medicine or I go to the doctor, like it's got to come out of that $34. Otherwise it has to go on credit. And he took the time to sit down and teach me about credit and work with me on a budget. And he didn't give me money, but he gave me resources and tools that I needed that helped improve my life to dig myself out of that situation. And that was super helpful to me because it wasn't a Band-Aid. It was taking a critical look at a situation and say, you need to you know, you're constantly starving. I'm not just going to give you a fish, teach you how to fish.
Right.
And we're going to make sure that this changes for you. And if it hadn't been for that guy, his name was Raphael, and it was like almost 10 years ago that he sat me down and did that. If it weren't for him, like, I wouldn't be where I'm at, because it was just a spot that I was uninformed, uneducated on.
Yeah.
And just, you know, the hour that he spent with me changed my life.
And so that actually illustrates something I said earlier. Good deeds begat good deeds. Raphael helped you out, and look at you now, 10 years later. You know, I see what you're doing, and I see how you're helping your community.
Well, and I've passed the information that he's given me on and said, okay, like, here's how you work a budget and financial forecasting for yourself, and here's how credit works. Like, we don't have classes like that in high school.
Yeah, I learned about credit when I was like 28. My parents had horrible credit, and basically were like, yo, you're gonna get screwed, don't mess with credit. I mean, that was the world we lived in. And I was probably 27, 28 before a friend of mine kind of did the same thing and sat me down and explained how this all worked. At that point, I tried to get a auto loan and was told that because I'd never had credit, I had no credit, which still blows me away. This system's so fucked that if you don't owe anybody any money, that's a bad thing. I have better credit now that I have, like, you know, $5,000 worth in various, you know, just revolving debt. But that's a whole nother episode. But yeah, credit's fucked up, and we don't teach that. And it oftentimes takes somebody that we respect to point that out. Another good example for me is I was undercharged on my labor until the same person that taught me about credit taught me about the value of my labor, and was like, bro, you could get away with charging $50 an hour for what you do because it's efficient. And I did, but it never dawned on me that, like, I could ask for what I'm worth. I'm so inculcated to think that I'm worth the lowest dollar because that's the society we live in. So, mutual aid. Mutual aid is building the community, and it takes many, many forms. One way is the direct mutual aid, like Taylor's talking about. Other ways are things like little free libraries, community pantries, community gardens, and maker spaces are just a few examples.
Pause.
Oh, we're good.
No.
You got perfect timing. So, that is what we have to say about that. Taylor, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and letting me come set up shop in your lovely home and hang out with Ghost wherever Ghost went.
Ghost is napping.
Oh, big shout out to Ghost. Ghost is adorable. You guys are missing out because you don't see the adorableness that is Ghost. So, yeah, any final shout outs? Where can people follow Kansas City Mutual Aid? All that good shit.
Kansas City Mutual Aid, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and we have a public page, and then we have a private group on Facebook. So aid requests to go through the private group, and just general information about us is on the public facing page. And our Instagram and Twitter handle is KC Mutual Aid. And we have a link tree in our bio that has more information and different ways you can donate.
Sweet, and I will have some of these links up and available, and I will have that master list up. So if there are any areas in your own life that you could use mutual aid, definitely take advantage of these programs. That's why they exist, yo. So, I guess I should do my plugs and stuff. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can find us on Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, Spotify, iHeartRadio, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Our social media is Red Leg Revolution on YouTube and Facebook, Red Leg Pod on the Twitter. That was Red Leg Revolution. I'm C-Dubs, and drink lots of water, get some sunlight. You're basically a houseplant with anxiety. And remember, our only hope is each other.